just 15 minutes, you can build a JavaScript counter that not only counts but also remembers your progress. Let's dive in and supercharge your scoring skills. Make sure to stay till the end to learn how to use local storage to store the counter values. Before we jump into the coding, let me show you a tool I will use to run all our projects. I'm using the Live Server extension by Ritwik Day in Visual Studio Code. To start the live server, simply click Go Live on the bottom status bar in Visual Studio Code. This will help us see our changes in real time as we code. Now, let us first look at the simple setup with HTML and CSS. I will only be giving an overview of the HTML and CSS code so that we can focus on JavaScript. First, we have the head tag in which we have the title of the page, Supercharged JS counter. Now, inside the body, we have this section called features. Now, I mainly kept this so that it will make styling easier. Then we have the storage section where we have the storage buttons, then the limits section where we can set custom limits, and then we have the counter, and then we have the increment and decrement buttons, and lastly we have the reset button. Now in styles.css, I did this general styling to remove all the margin padding, and this box sizing border box makes it easier to style the page. Now the body has just a few fonts, and I'm using display flex to style the content, and we have a few general styles here. Now let us first create the main.js file and link it to the HTML. So we use the script tag to link the JavaScript files to the HTML file. First, I will include all the HTML elements through JavaScript in the JavaScript file. So first, let us create an input area where we can include all the inputs. So first we'll have the custom input, and we use document.querySelector, which lets us select a HTML element using its class or ID. Since I have .custom class for the custom input, we use .custom, and for max .max, and for min.min, and etc. So const max input equal to document.querySelector .max. You can use single quotes or double quotes, it doesn't matter. Now we're going to include the buttons. So first we have the increment button. We use input as a convention for the input and btn as a convention for the buttons. After the increment and decrement buttons, we have the reset button, the save button, and the load button. Now that we have included all the inputs and buttons, let us include the counter display. Now first, let us start working with the custom increments and max and min values. Since we are going to be using this custom input in different parts of the project, let us create a custom increment variable. In JavaScript, we use let to initialize variables whose value can be changed. Now let us add an event listener to the custom input. This will enable us to check for any value that the user entered. This syntax of function is called arrow functions. So now we'll set the custom increment equal to number of event dot target dot value. The event dot target dot value is the input entered in the custom input, and we're going to convert it into a number. Now let us set the default max value to be around 10,000. Let's add an event listener to the max input. Now let us set max equal to number of event dot target dot value. Now this is the same thing we did for custom increment. This max input lets the user enter the maximum amount the counter can go to. Now let's do the same thing for minimum and set it to minus 10,000. Let's add the event listener. Now that we have our custom increment, max and min ready, let us now focus on the increment and decrement buttons. First, let's start with the increment button. Now because this is a button, the event is click, and we have the same function, but since we don't enter anything into the buttons, we do not need to add the event variable. So first, let us create a value variable which stores the counter display value summed with the custom increment. We create this variable so that we can check if it is greater than the max value. So we'll check if value is greater than max, counter display dot class list dot add error. What this does is it will add a class error which will make sure the user knows that it's an error. You can see from here that the shake animation is there. So it will shake the counter display a little and turn it red color. So now we'll set timeout. What this does is it waits for a period of time before performing an action. So counter display dot class list dot remove error. So now we want to remove the error animation because the user already has been notified of the error, and we wait for a period of 820 milliseconds because the animation is for a period of 820 milliseconds. Now if the value is not greater than max, then we change the counter display to be equal to the value. Now that we have added our increment button functionality, let us check the progress. So now we can see without adding any custom increment or max value or min value, the default increment is 1. Let us just check. What if the custom increment is 5? Now it increases by a value of 5. Now what if the max value is 30? It will let us go up till 30, but it won't let us go above 30. So you can see the cool animation here. Now let us go back and add the decrement button functionality. So we add the event listener and set the event to be click because this is also a button. Let value equal to number of counter display dot inner HTML minus the custom increment. So the important thing to remember is to always convert it into a number because we are dealing with numbers here. By default, the values are going to be counted as strings. We created this value variable to check if it is less than the minimum value. If it is less than the minimum value, we again want to display an error. And again we do the same set timeout. Now otherwise, if the value is not less than the min, we can change the counter display to the value variable. So now let us check our progress. So now we can see we can add by 1 the custom default increment. Now we can subtract by 1. Now what happens if we add 100? We can increment by 100, we can decrement by 100. Now let's set the max value to be 101 and the min value to be minus 101. So now what happens? We cannot decrease below minus 101. We will not be able to increase above 99 because 99 plus 100 is greater than 101. Now let us work on the reset button functionality. So what this reset button does is remove the counter value without storing it. So now first let us create a prompt which is a pop-up which will ask the user to type in an answer. So we will ask the user to type in yes to confirm. So now if the answer they enter is yes, then we'll change the counter display's inner HTML, which is the value, to 0 again. So now let us check this. Let us have a value of 5. Now once we click reset, you can see that it says type in yes to confirm. This will work in any browser, doesn't matter, but I'm using the Arc browser. So now I type in yes and you can see the value gets reset. Now we have done the basic functionality. Now let's add the save and load functionality. For the save button, we'll add an event listener, click. We're going to use the local storage. So local storage is the storage present in the browser in this current profile. So now we do local storage.set item. Set item allows us to create a variable in the local storage and set a value to it. We'll call that variable the counter, and the value will be counter display.text content. Since we do not want the full inner HTML of the counter display, we just want the text. So that's why we'll only store the text content in the local storage variable counter, and then we'll alert the user that we have successfully saved the counter value. What is the difference between prompt and alert? Prompt asks the user to type in a value, while alert just alerts the user without asking for any input. Now let us check our counter. So the load button dot add event listener will use the click event again. So now let us get the value from the local storage. I'll store it in a variable called stored count. We use the get item property of the local storage to get the item, and we use the variable name counter. So now once we have it, we use if stored count. Now what does this do? It checks if stored count is a string, and if it is a string, then it will enter the if and perform the action, but if it failed to locate it, then it won't perform any action. So now we'll do counter display dot inner HTML equal to stored count. So now we'll be able to load, save and store our count. If we increase our variable to 20 and now save, it shows successfully saved counter, and once we refresh and click load save count, we'll be able to load the saved value. And you can experiment with the custom increment or decrement and the max and min values. If you enjoyed building this supercharged counter with me, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more coding tutorials. Want to start with something a bit simpler? Check out the video on the screen now for a basic counter tutorial. And if you're looking to strengthen your HTML skills, I've got a whole playlist about it. Make sure to check it out.